Welcome back to Inside the Helmet, everybody. It is the month of April now, which means that, well, first of all, how do you like our little April Fool's joke yesterday where we didn't post the episode yesterday? Um, no, that wasn't by design. We're just recording it now on Thursday, the 2nd of April. But with it being April, it is NFL draft month. And the Las Vegas Raiders, I almost said the Oakland Raiders for some reason, but they have been on the clock for, a matter of months now, ever since the season ended. It's been a pretty open and shut case of most people believe that they're going to be drafting one Fernando Mendoza, reigning Heisman Trophy winner with the first overall pick, to hopefully come in and ultimately, over a long period of time, be able to turn their franchise's fortunes around. But whether it was, do you remember? My dad's here, by the way. I
Hello.
forgot to introduce us. I kind of just jumped right into it. Do you remember if it was today or yesterday that the Raiders, um, the aforementioned Vegas Raiders, just signed Kirk Cousins to their roster?
Well, you told me about it today. I didn't see it myself, but
Okay.
you know,
I guess it doesn't really matter if it was today or yesterday. Either way, um, yeah, they go out and with what they're projected to be doing with that first overall pick, they're also going out and signing a well-established veteran, admittedly one who's probably on his last legs in terms of his NFL playing career. He's getting up there. He's probably what, 37, 38 by now.
yeah, it's on the
And
backside of
so
35.
he had well, regardless, he hasn't had the best past couple of years with the Falcons, splitting time with Michael Penix and all that. Basically his career has kind of
Peaked.
been very meh ever since he left Minnesota. And so yeah,
His paychecks haven't been, but yeah, I
sure,
think he's reached his ceiling. Is yeah,
certainly, he certainly reached his ceiling probably 5 or so years ago,
he's
back
not
when he
leading
was
the
in
Raiders
Minnesota.
to this. He's not leading the Raiders back to glory.
No, certainly not. And so, to someone who maybe doesn't have such a deep understanding of football, it might not make a whole lot of sense as to why a team would actively seek out somebody like that, let alone give him such a sizable contract. It's not like they signed him to a league minimum type deal. They signed him to a pretty penny. I think he is making like $20 million next year, with the option to turn that 1 year 20 million deal into like a 5 year 170 million. Is I think that's kind of what I read. So I don't know all the terms behind that. Anyway, that's not the point.
His agent throughout his career
Should get in the Hall
is
of Fame.
yes. For
Um
what he's produced, and I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback.
mhm.
He's a good to sometimes very good, but
Mhm.
he's never been great. And
Certainly.
yeah, this guy's made a lot of money.
Mhm. Yeah, but anyway, the point in mentioning this, why I think it's important to address it, is that someone may look at this move and go, well, why have you gone and done that? It's not like you've gone and signed some other lowly backup just as like insurance in case Fernando Mendoza doesn't come out of the blocks firing on all cylinders like you might hope he would. They've gone out and gotten someone with a higher price tag, and why would you do that? Well, as we've seen over the years, NFL teams, particularly the ones that are drafting in the top five and are in need of a quarterback in any particular year, they have liked to draft their guy and then make them the day one starter. They're throwing
Sure.
this 22, 23-year-old rookie quarterback straight into the fire against a full-fledged NFL defense. And as you can probably imagine, that doesn't typically yield the best results, or at least it hasn't in the past few years. And
Right.
um, so I'd like to kind of open up discussion as to why this move to acquire Kirk Cousins is actually a really good move and not one that I had really seen them doing, but yeah, I really like it.
Yeah. So my first comment before we even get into the actual topic
Hmm.
is if I'm the Raiders general manager, I'm not drafting Mendoza with the first overall pick.
Really?
I don't think he's worthy of it. I enjoyed his run in the college playoffs. I think he's a great human. He's a very good quarterback, but I don't think that he is elite enough to be the number one overall pick. He's
If
a
he's
winner.
not, then who is?
Well, if I'm the Raiders, I'm trading down or
Hmm.
picking one of these edge rushers or somebody who's
Hmm.
elite. And I haven't studied the film, so I don't know which one I would pick. But
Huh.
I don't
Okay.
think that there is a day one franchise quarterback in this draft. Um,
That is
and
something I've heard, and I've been seeing floating around on social media as well. People are awfully critical of this draft class, which is very interesting because this, if I were, if things had turned out a little differently, given my class that I'm in, this would be my class. If I were to enter the NFL draft at my first opportunity of eligibility to, this would be the class I would be a part of. So that's a little
well,
side note that's
no
kind of
no
what.
offense, but I would draft Mendoza over you right now.
Well, so would I.
So yeah, I mean, love you, bro, but hey,
Uh huh.
uh, you know, uh, but
Um.
but I don't see Mendoza as being a number one overall draft pick. It doesn't mean he won't have a pretty good NFL career. He certainly is not going to turn around the Raiders. But
Yeah.
I get what they're trying to maybe do, and the big question anyway is why do you bring in a veteran if you're going to draft a quarterback
Mhm.
first overall? And
Exactly. That's the root of what we're trying to address. We could go
right,
on about like debating, oh, well, what would you do? Would you draft Mendoza? Would you take somebody else? Would you take a
we'll
different
save that for another show.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But we're
exactly.
here at the root of like essentially, spoiler alert, we're addressing the topic of mentorship.
Right.
An older, more experienced quarterback, doesn't matter how successful they are in their own right, but an older, more experienced veteran NFL quarterback mentoring the young buck who is
So
hoped
I'll
and
tell you,
expected to
yeah.
save the
So
franchise.
so here's my answer.
Okay.
As a non NFL quarterback, right?
Hmm.
But knowing how much starting NFL quarterbacks make,
Hmm.
if a team says, look, we want you to come in and be the starter in week one while we're grooming this guy, whether it's for half a season or for one season, a la Patrick Mahomes, who didn't start at all at his
Hmm.
first season, um, and we want to pay you $20 million. Just from the standpoint of that as the older quarterback, you're going, well, gee, I'm kind of past my prime. Maybe I'm not going to make the Hall of Fame, but I can make all the money that I can, and I can
Hmm.
go in and I can teach this guy. There's so much to know and learn about the rhythm and the speed of the game and how to read defenses and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. If I could share my knowledge and get paid incredibly well to do that and also get to play some games until they're ready to put the rookie in. It's a great deal for a quarterback if they uh, are willing to admit to themselves that they've reached their ceiling and they're on the backside of the hill. And
Certainly.
I think Kirk Cousins is a prime candidate for that. He
Oh
certainly
yeah.
has knowledge to pass on, and
Mm.
he will enjoy cashing those paychecks. Now, if you had a person who's still in their prime, and since we mentioned Mahomes, I'll just stick with him.
Mm-hmm.
If the Chiefs somehow wound up with the number one pick and said we're picking a number one, a quarterback, number one, and Patrick Mahomes, we want you to mentor him. If you're in your prime, you're like, no way am I doing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I have to be a starter. I'm still, young enough and in my prime. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in that. And I don't care how much you pay me because I'm trying to put up statistics. And in the case of Mahomes, he's already a Hall of Fame lock. So now he's
Mm-hmm.
chasing rings and numbers and championships and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah. Of
nobody's certainly going to bring in a quarterback when you have Mahomes on the roster to
course.
compete with him. But um, maybe I should downgrade it a little bit and say, I thought of Dak Prescott.
I thought of him
Uh,
too.
yeah, but I mean, he's also the undisputed starter
Mm-hmm.
uh, in Dallas. I'm trying to think real quick of a quarterback who's maybe kind of on that bubble
Trevor
where
Lawrence.
I think he's still on the rise.
I think
Um,
so too, but I mean, he still is not at that level where he's proven his
but
place.
he's
He's proven
young.
the potential, but he hasn't like solidified it. He hasn't like
Yeah, I'm
gone on
trying
a
to think
deep
of it.
playoff run.
Well, no.
Been MVP conversations.
No, but he's still on the rise, and there's potential. I'm thinking of
Mm,
another quarterback who's on the backside. It's a pretty good gig if you can get it from a money standpoint.
mm-hmm.
Uh, Colt McCoy, after like his first 2 years, became the veteran presence quarterback backup, and I think he made $50 million or something out of the NFL just
Mm-hmm.
being a backup and standing on the sideline holding a clipboard. You know,
Yep.
shoot, man, sign me up for that. So anyway, the value of mentorship is if you are going to draft a player, particularly a quarterback, that high, you want to find somebody who's got good character. And we've never heard anything bad about Kirk Cousins' character.
Not at
Um,
all.
to come in and show your new face of your franchise how to operate in this new environment and how to process, from the huddle to the snap of the ball and beyond, and just how to be an NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So there is a value in bringing in somebody like a Kirk Cousins. Wouldn't be shocked if maybe the quarterbacks who wind up being the mentor, some of them wind up being quarterback coaches after they retire.
Certainly.
And so, yeah, I mean, not a bad move by the Raiders to bring in Kirk
Mm-hmm.
Cousins and say, okay, look, we'll let you start for a while, and then you're going to become the mentor. Again, my issue is Mendoza, that guy. When your team is that bad, I mean, we've seen not quarterbacks, but we've seen teams before who are a quarterback away. They've got a
Mm-hmm.
really strong defense and they've got some good skill players and everything else, and their quarterback just chokes in the playoffs year after year, and you're thinking, we need to get in a winner.
Mm-hmm.
The Raiders are not that. Uh,
No,
we
they're
we could
more
have
than a quarterback away.
yeah, we could have an entire discussion about team building. And do you start with the quarterback and then build around him, which is actually, ironically, what the Cowboys did with Troy Aikman.
Mm-hmm.
The only piece that they really had in place at the time, well, they drafted Michael Irvin the year before, and he promptly got hurt. But where do you start building your team if you really want to make a long time contender?
Yeah.
If you come across a quarterback who just is so special that you go, well, look, we could build our team up, but we're never going to have a chance at this guy. He's magical. Then I get it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't I don't know that Mendoza is that guy.
Yeah,
So
again, the topic of Mendoza himself. I personally am not going to be so quick to make such an assumption in the negative way. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, after all, you're not going to go undefeated, win the national championship, ball out in the national championship, and win the Heisman Trophy by accident. You're not going to
true.
do all of that in one season and be a bad player. But also, it's not like Mendoza was like this big name that was constantly in Heisman discussions throughout his whole collegiate career. I mean, he
Right.
mostly came into the light in this past season and achieved all of this in a way kind of like Joe Burrow did, but obviously, not comparing Mendoza to Burrow because I believe that Burrow had the greatest
Burrow had double the
college season
numbers.
of all time.
He had double the numbers, and he also had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson as his wide
Yeah,
receivers.
totally different systems, totally different styles of offense, but that's a
Yeah.
whole nother discussion. Before we close off this topic and move on, we mentioned a couple names that I want to kind of throw out there for the audience to kind of think about, because I think they kind of fall into these examples, the two sides of this issue very well. And on one hand, we have the Trevor Lawrence's of the world, the ones that were drafted in to be the savior and were named the week 1 starter before draft night was over, basically.
Yeah.
And they're thrown into the fire, sink or swim. And we saw with Trevor Lawrence, even for all the hype, for all the buzz around him, for all the potential, he didn't get off to quite the start that people had hoped. He wasn't immediately coming in and being John Elway or
Neither did Bryce
whoever.
Young.
Well, I mean, Bryce Young is just you
Heisman Trophy winner, I mean, savior of franchise.
but also Bryce Young was not seen as the generational prospect that Trevor Lawrence was. So I think
Fair enough.
Lawrence is an even better example for this because he had even more hype and potential seen about him. Bryce Young, I mean, he's smaller. He doesn't have a big arm. People already had their doubts about him. There weren't any doubts about Trevor Lawrence physically going into draft night. So
True.
that's why I prefer to use him as the example. But anyway, obviously, like I was mentioning, Trevor Lawrence, for all the hype and buzz about him, he didn't immediately come in and put up MVP type numbers or anything
No.
like that. He almost started to creep into draft bust conversations. Whereas you get to Patrick Mahomes on the other side, and obviously, what we know now about Mahomes is that he is one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks of all time, at
Right.
least. Like that. That's being that's being like safe. If you want to crown Mahomes the second best quarterback of all time, I will give that to you, and I will not argue. If you want to say he's the most talented in terms of physical ability of all time, then I will not argue with you either. But anyway, but he, for all that he has done, for all he's achieved, he wasn't the day 1 starter. He barely played at all his rookie year. He only played like in week 17, which at the time was the last week of the regular season, and he sat behind Alex Smith,
Right.
a quarterback, a good, not great quarterback who bounced around the league.
Number one overall pick when he came out.
Well, yeah, he was, but
Yep.
this wasn't a young number 1 overall pick, Alex Smith, that mentored Mahomes. This was 12-year NFL veteran Alex Smith, a guy who, again, yeah, was drafted number 1 overall, sure, but that's not why he stayed in the NFL for 12 years. He stayed in the NFL for 12 years by being a good, solid quarterback that you could win with. Maybe wouldn't knock your socks off every week, but you could win with him, week in, week out. And so, Mahomes sitting behind somebody who nowadays, I mean, if you look at the all-time quarterback rankings list, they're a mile apart from each other,
Yeah.
obviously, because of what Mahomes has achieved. But I think that it's not a stupid thing to say if you wanted to make the claim that Mahomes' success could be partially attributed to the fact that he got to sit and be mentored by Alex Smith in his rookie year.
And he came into a decent team. He wasn't the number one pick. The
Sure.
last number one overall pick quarterback that I thought was worthy, just before we move on,
Mm-hmm.
um, probably was Andrew Luck.
Okay.
I mean, he was clearly special in
Mm-hmm.
his abilities. We didn't understand at the time the way it turned
Yeah.
out with him, that he is just a really different dude
Mm-hmm.
mentally, and suddenly just up and said, "Yeah, I've made enough money. I'm out."
Yeah. And this was before the, social media era craziness where everybody's posting their highlights online and there's all this buzz about like every single kid that can pay for a recruiting service.
Sure.
And so Andrew Luck had that John Elway type of hype as a prospect before all this social media stuff. So that's how you know it's legit.
And he had that level of talent,
Mm-hmm. He
too.
he
I mean,
certainly did. He backed it
well,
up.
between you and me, sorry, I lived through both eras, and I'm picking Elway over Andrew Luck every time. But
I mean, who wouldn't?
Andrew Luck is in the discussion about
Mm-hmm.
number one overall quarterback picks who were worthy of the number one overall pick. I know
Yes.
I keep going back to this.
Mm-hmm.
Mendoza may have been the best quarterback in college last year.
Mm-hmm.
Again, look at what he produced, and great
Mm-hmm.
guy. But if I'm the Raiders, I'm either trading the pick and getting somebody else, or keeping the pick and picking a different position.
See, the thing about that with me is, while I understand that, sure, Fernando Mendoza. We're not going to go on forever about this, but I can't resist saying this one thing. He's like, sure, Fernando Mendoza may not be, as good of a draft prospect as someone like an Andrew Luck or a Patrick Mahomes or one of these like generational, you can't afford to miss them types. But like at the end of the day, you can only clean as well. You can only like clean as well as the materials you have. You can only do as good of a job with what's available. Do you know what I mean? Like you what I'm trying to say is like you can't kind of be nitpicky about the quality of Fernando Mendoza compared to prospects of the past because he's not in the 2020 NFL draft. He's not in the 2012 NFL draft, whatever.
Hmm.
He's in the 2026 NFL draft, and of the 2026 quarterback prospects, you have to look at all of them, and I think that if you look at all of them, Fernando Mendoza is at least a head and shoulder ahead of everybody else. And so if I'm the Raiders, even if maybe it's a little underwhelming compared to some prospects of the past. He's still, in my opinion, head and shoulders above everybody else that's coming out in the same class as him. And so you can't really afford to let another team take him.
Yeah, but you and I both know if he was in the 2027 class, he would not be the number one quarterback, because we know the hype that's coming for that, because there's a certain burnt orange quarterback who's going to be eligible for the draft and has the name and has shown flashes, at least,
Yeah.
at times. But the name itself is, I mean, imagine the hype. Again, a whole other show, a whole nother time, and probably
Mm-hmm.
save it for after the next college football season to see if he
Yeah.
lives up to it, if he lives up
It's
to it or not. But Arch Manning, if Arch Manning was in the draft next year and Fernando Mendoza was in the draft next year, it's not close.
I certainly hope you're right. I do believe that there would be a team out there, whether it would be the Raiders or somebody else, that would take the Manning bait, no matter what Arch actually produces, no
Yeah.
matter what the product is on the field. Somebody would fall for the Manning hype. And obviously, I'm not trying to self sabotage here and go against my team that I root for. Of course, we're diehard Longhorn fans, so I certainly do believe in the Arch Manning hype. But I also have witnessed in some big games, not necessarily blaming it all on Arch, but I mean he's just not there yet. He hasn't
No,
had the experience. He's had 1 year as a full time starter.
it was up and down, but
So yeah, it
his
was up and down.
when
He
he was up,
hasn't.
he was really up.
Mhm. I mean,
So
certainly, but then there were also some really low lows, and so obviously you take the good with the bad. It's
early in the
quarterback
season, he
season
was
after all.
bouncing the ball at people's feet and
Hmm. Yeah,
overthrowing by
he
10
certainly
yards.
improved over the course of the year, and I really am looking forward to next season. Watching, well, that it won't technically be his final go round. He is technically eligible for this draft, I think, because he's been out of high school for 3 years.
Yeah.
He's in the same class as me. He could have gone, but obviously it's way too early.
Funny thing is, and then we'll switch off of this because we
Mm-hmm.
kind of keep jumping into other
Mm-hmm.
conversations. But just my observation of Arch Manning was he was overthinking. He was too nervous, and then he had a
Oh yeah.
game where he got concussed, where
Mm-hmm.
he landed hard on his head, and it was like when he came back from that, he stopped overthinking and he started just playing.
Hmm.
And that was a turning point in his season last year, where
Yeah.
he went from being, just, geez, what's wrong with this guy? He's not all he's made out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly he started playing really, really well. So anyway, we spent way too long on all
Can I
this.
spend one more minute on Arch
Well,
Manning?
of course,
What would you say to the prospect? So I love Dak Prescott as the Cowboys quarterback so much. I believe that he has gotten a lot of unjust criticism from detractors who simply criticize him for the logo on his helmet.
agree.
I believe Dak is easily a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, top 5 even on his good days.
Yep.
But it's undeniable that despite his statistics he's been putting up, it hasn't translated to playoff success
Nope.
for the 9 years that he's been the starter. And I wonder if maybe it wouldn't be the worst decision if the Cowboys were to have another lackluster season next year, God forbid, if they go all in on Arch Manning.
Well, he'd be gone before they draft because they tend to finish middle of the pack. But if
That's why
they,
you trade up and take
yeah,
Arch
but if they,
Manning to sit behind Dak Prescott.
well, they would have to trade Dak Prescott to get up that high to get Arch Manning.
Then maybe Kirk Cousins only takes the 1 year deal in Vegas, and then we sign him to mentor Arch.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I'm trying to like speak into existence a Manning with a star on his helmet is all.
Right.
I want Arch
I'm not
Manning to have the career that I envisioned for myself when I was 9 years old. Is
right.
all.
No, I'm rooting for Arch Manning. He's a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely got some skills. We saw
Mm-hmm.
him grow this year, finally, and
Yeah.
next year is going to determine whether he's going to be the number one overall pick or whether he's going to be, a first round pick later who gets in on the Manning name.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know yet. Um,
Yeah.
we'll see. I mean, at this point, like you said, he's been a full time starter for 1 year. We saw Peyton, of course, in college. Well, you didn't, but you weren't born yet, but um,
I
Peyton,
wasn't even thought of yet.
no, Peyton in college had already established himself uh,
Mhm.
before he went into what essentially would be his arch of redshirt senior. Now,
Arch is
uh,
a redshirt sophomore. He's my age.
yeah, I lose
I'm a
I lose
straight up
track because he
junior.
because he sat behind Quinn Ewers for a while, but
So
um,
he's going into his redshirt junior year.
okay. Eli also established himself uh, before we started talking about him for the NFL.
Hmm.
Arch is just it's a different world that we live in, and yeah,
Hmm.
I mean maybe some show will just dedicate a whole segment to Arch because he's such an interesting
Hmm.
topic. Um,
If we can't
but
get Arch Manning on the Cowboys, can we get Marshall Manning, Peyton's
I've seen
son?
that Peyton's kid is now playing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's like
that's just
14 or
funny.
something. So hey,
Yeah,
Marshall Manning could be coming out in the NFL draft around the time where Dak is, you know, you
true.
know,
Yeah, ready to hang it
9
up.
years older would actually be at the tail end of his career if he's able to stay healthy. And
Yeah,
it would be time to seriously pick a new quarterback if we do stick with Dak for the long run.
maybe so.
I've heard
Um,
people say that, oh, maybe the Manning genes skipped Arch and went straight to Marshall, even though that's not how it works. But
yeah, I don't think that's fair to Arch, but
it's
um,
certainly not. But I mean, Marshall can spin it.
let's 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 switch to your F1 segment before we have our
Yeah,
face off or whatever
yeah.
you want to call this.
F1 went racing in Japan last weekend. It's the final F1 race for 5 weeks. The next Formula One race will be at the beginning of May in Miami, a very much disliked venue for Formula One among fans because of the poor quality racing. The track layout isn't that great. It's too expensive. All that. That they Americanized everything, which basically means they like fluff it up full of all this like other nonsense to like monetize it. Anyway, that's not the point.
They
Um,
have some band come on and play on a stage.
Basically, they over dramatize everything
Yeah.
and make it more than what it needs to be. Anyway, that's not the point. We're talking about in Japan, where we saw some more instances of the engine regulations. I won't go on about them forever because I've talked about them before. Um, Basically, if you're unfamiliar, Formula One for 2026 have changed up the regulations of how teams make their engines, where now they're relying on 50% gas engine power and 50% battery power. This battery is something that has been shown to drain very quickly, and so over the course of simply one straightaway, drivers are using up all of their battery, and so by the end of the straightaway, they are slowing down significantly. Whereas beforehand, when the car relied more heavily on gas power, they wouldn't be losing this power. And so many fans have criticized the sport and the regulations for ruining racing, and I frankly fall among that group that have been very critical because I I for one don't fall into the category of being all woke and pushing for all this environmental stuff, like, sure, but more so than like, oh, electric car bad. Like, if you look at how much Formula One travels by air, that is polluting. If you want to talk about air pollution, that does like hundreds of times more damage than anything the cars are spitting out. That's a whole other topic. In Japan, we saw Oscar Piastri, of course, McLaren driver, and third place in the championship last year. Um, Finally, get to start a main race after he hit the wall and had to retire on the way to the grid in Australia, his home race and the season opener. And then in China, he was able to do the sprint race where he got 2 points. And then for the main race, both he and McLaren teammate Lando Norris were unable to start the race due to some car issues with their engine, I believe. So Oscar temporarily had a stat where he had technically, because sprint races don't count for a race start, he had 0 race starts but 2 points thanks to the sprint race. But he knocked that statistic out of the park in Japan by actually being able to start the race. And he, like the Ferraris have been doing all this season, got the jump on the McLarens with a phenomenal start. He led the opening stages of the race, looking very much like he was capable of taking the fight to the Mercedes, which is something that no one has really been able to do. Now, this is very interesting to see because Mercedes, as we mentioned before, or as I mentioned anyway, are an engine manufacturer. So they obviously make their own engines, or power units as they're called, is the technical name. So the Mercedes obviously make their own engines for their own Formula One team, but then they also sell these engines out and supply them to some other teams, including McLaren. And thus far this season, it's been very peculiar that it seems like Mercedes are really the only ones that seem to be able to get the full extent of the power out of the Mercedes engine. But it seems like in Japan, at least Oscar Piastri was able to utilize it to almost its fullest extent, or at least more than any non Mercedes driver has been able to thus far this season. However, unfortunately, it could only go on for so long, and before regular programming ensued, where after a safety car brought out for Ollie Behrman of the Haas team having a very violent crash, which caused leg contusions in his knees. But it seems like he'll be all right. He has 5 weeks to recover before Miami. He'll be all right. Um, Kimi Antonelli, the 19-year-old driver for Mercedes in his second year, was able to take the lead and would go on to win his second ever race and second in a row. And so he now is Formula One's youngest ever championship leader after taking the lead from teammate George Russell after the win in Japan. So, yeah. In other news in Formula One, if you've noticed, I'm wearing one of my many Max Verstappen shirts. Max has, of course, continued to be very critical of these regulations, as he's been even dating back years before the regulations were actually enacted and put in place. He's been critical and speculative of the quality of the cars that we're awaiting, and now that he's actually in the car and those are the cars that that he has to drive, he doesn't like it. Red Bull have dropped the ball when it comes to their engine, as many have. And yeah, it every week the Max Verstappen retirement rumors grow stronger and stronger, and that there is now. I originally was thinking, okay, well, he won't retire after this year, but if he has to put up with more of this nonsense in 2027, then yeah, I could see him terminating his contract early and leaving, and just going to do whatever else he wants to do. But after hearing him
How
talk,
old is Matt? How old is Max?
he's 28.
Yeah, you're not retiring from what you love at 28. You don't. I don't think you.
Well, that's the thing.
I don't think you have that conversation with yourself because you're saying, look, one, I'm young and there's way too much life left for me to just go sit on a beach. I don't care
Well,
how much money you've made, but there's also a real opportunity to still make in the next decade or decade and a half, you know, all of the money, generational money.
see, if we were talking about any other driver, I would probably agree with you. But here's the thing: Max has achieved more than
I get it.
anyone could.
He's the Michael Jordan of F1.
Well, he's achieved more than anyone could ever dream of in Formula One. He's achieved more than he certainly originally, could have imagined that he would achieve in F1. He's a four-time world champion, 71, I
Yeah,
think, time
what's he gonna do? Retire and
race
go
win.
work at a burger joint?
No,
I mean,
no,
come on.
no. Max Verstappen has multi-generational wealth at this point through his
Okay,
obviously his salary, through driving, but also his many other endeavors, selling merchandise, doing sponsorship deals, whatever. Money is not an issue for him. He's not sticking around in Formula One for the money. He has actually gone on record being very vocal about the fact that he does not drive anymore in Formula One to specifically try and bolster his statistics, to try and add to his legacy, because in his own words, in his own opinion, he's done everything that he really feels like he wants to go out and do. He has proclaimed that he drives in
maybe
Formula One for the fun of it because he
maybe
enjoys
he
doing it.
will maybe he will go full on Michael Jordan. He'll retire from F1 racing and he'll take up professional baseball.
I
Right?
was about to say, well, Kimi Raikkonen and Fernando Alonso, two other world champions, have retired and then come back. But no, neither of them went and played baseball. They just went and raced in
Yeah.
other
I
series.
mean, just find something that
But
you enjoyed as a child, that you dreamed about as
he
a child.
does. See,
Yeah.
Max Verstappen lives and breathes racing. That
Right.
that is his thing. Like I
So,
don't want you to sit here and think that he's gonna retire and go, sit on the beach all day or whatever. No, he has his endeavors. He keeps busy even during the F1 season. There was a
right.
week off in between China and Japan. And in that week off, he went and raced GT3 endurance racing
Yeah.
at the Nürburgring in
Some
Germany.
people are
He
addicted to
has his own
competition.
racing team in a whole
Yeah.
different series.
People like that have to love competition. They have to love the adrenaline rush.
Mm-hmm. And he
And
does. But
that's
he,
that's
he's
what
not loving these cars.
that's what I've heard many post career interviews with Michael Jordan, who was kind of your Max Verstappen now.
Mm-hmm.
I watched him, and he says what he misses the most is the competition, the thrill, the getting your juices flowing, and all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
people like that who are so competitive have to find an outlet for it. With Michael Jordan, he for a while at least got into gambling, and he was playing golf against his buddies and betting $1,000 a hole and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They just have to compete. But okay,
Yeah.
so uh, moving on to our last segment,
Yeah.
we've started a competition,
Mm-hmm.
and
We've actually come up with a name for this segment
yeah,
called Rattle 'em Off, because essentially what this competitive
rattle them off.
segment is we'll pick a topic or something to essentially test our own memory,
Yeah,
whether it's football or something else. And we're essentially, I mean, for example, the best way to describe it is to just kind of peek back into previous episodes and explain what we did. So the first time we took turns going back and forth trying to see how many Hall of Fame NFL quarterbacks we could name. And the winner was just the one who could keep going after the other one couldn't think of any more.
and who won?
So we're essentially doing that. I won that one.
Okay,
And then the one before that was Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, right? I
and who
won that
won
one
that?
too. No, it was Super Bowl
No,
participating quarterbacks, and I won that one too.
you haven't won both
I
competitions.
have. I have won both of them.
Wow. All right. I better step it up. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
tell us the topic today.
So, for those of you who don't know, the name of the podcast, Inside the Helmet, is partially inspired by my two greatest passions in terms of sports, being American football and Formula One racing. Both sports that involve wearing a helmet as a participant, and so I I know that we kind of focus more on football because that's more what the American audience knows more about, and also, what we both know about as
What
hosts
your
more.
co-host knows about.
Hmm?
It's what your co-host knows about.
I mean that too.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I've thought of a way that we can kind of use this segment to merge the two and kind of put my Formula One knowledge that I've accrued through my little over 2 years of being a fan of the sport, which sounds crazy. It feels like yesterday I downloaded F1 23 and just played it. Um,
So what's our topic?
so yes, so I will be trying to name, and this is a little different than our previous topics because we're not going head to head at the same topic. We're just trying to keep naming people from our topic until we run out. So I am trying to name F1 World Drivers Champions, drivers who have won a championship in Formula One since 1950, since the inception of the sport.
Okay.
You are trying to name what was it? Super Bowl MVPs?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you do have a slightly larger sample size. Obviously, there have been some repeat Super Bowl MVPs, but there have been a lot more repeat F1 drivers champions. There are 35, I believe, that I'll have to try and name. And if you can name more than 35, then I guess you win, or maybe
Yeah.
if we reach that point, I'll come
No,
up.
if I can name more than 35,
All
I
right,
win.
if you can name 36 or more Super Bowl MVPs, then yeah, you get it. So
That
I'll let you go
that's
first.
assuming that you're actually going to name all 35. No,
I know I can.
I think I've gone first a couple of
Fine.
times.
Then I will start. I'm going to go in chronological order, by the way, by
Okay.
order of their first championship triumph. So
Okay.
I will start with 1950 Formula One champion Giuseppe Farina.
All right. So I'm going to do the stuff that comes easiest to me, which is Dallas Cowboys, who have won Super Bowl MVP, because
Okay.
that's forefront.
Mm-hmm.
And my all-time MVP of Dallas Cowboys, Super Bowl MVPs, is number 12, Roger Staubach.
It's crazy. He only won one Super Bowl MVP of the
Yeah.
two Super Bowls they won.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Then I will go to 1951 champion Juan Manuel Fangio.
Okay. Um, Once you name one Super Bowl Cowboys quarterback MVP,
Mm-hmm.
there's only been one other one, so
Mm-hmm.
that's Troy Aikman.
All right. Then I will name 1952 champion Alberto Ascari.
Okay. If I'm going to mention one of the triplets, I have to go for the other triplet, which would be Emmett Smith.
Okay.
Okay.
Then we don't get a different champion. It bounced back and forth between Ascari won it twice in a row, and then Fangio won the next four in a row. So we have to go to 1958 and Mike Hawthorne.
Okay. Well, we know the Cowboys three-peated in the 90s,
Mm.
and their three
They
MVP.
didn't three-peat. They won
Well,
three
no,
in
no,
4 years.
three or four, yes. They
Yeah.
won three out of four. So there was
Should have
Aikman,
four-peated.
Emmett, and then the unlikely one, then their last Super Bowl appearance and Super Bowl victory was a cornerback out of
Mm-hmm.
TCU named Larry Brown, who happened to pick off Neil O'Donnell twice.
Yep. Um. All right, then we get to 1959 and Jack Brabham.
Okay. I'm going back to the 70s again when I was a kid, and there was the only time that they've had co MVPs. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I get to name them individually. I don't have
Yeah,
to
you
name
do.
them.
I'll give it to you.
Okay. The first one, I was 12 years old, 1977-78 season. The first of the co MVPs would be, and he actually had a radio show called The Beautiful Harvey Martin Show.
Hmm.
So Harvey Martin, number 79, right defensive end.
Okay. Then Sorry, I said 59 Jack Brabham. So now we go to 1961 and Phil Hill, the first American champion and the only American born champion.
Okay. Co MVP with Harvey Martin was his right defensive tackle next to him. Uh, he was half man, half monster, so they called
Mm-hmm.
him the Manster, number 54, Randy White.
Okay. Then the very next year in 1962, of no relation to Phil, we have Graham Hill.
Okay. Um, Finishing out the Cowboys MVPs, uh, it's the only time that MVP has been named for a team who lost.
Mm-hmm. I
With
know
the
where you're
Cowboys.
going with this. Yep. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the Chuck Howleys in the Hall of Fame. He was a member of the class of 2023. Okay. I just said Graham Hill, so now we get a 1963 champion, Jim Clark. I'd imagine, especially in recent times. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bart Starr was the MVP of Super Bowl one. I know that off the top of my memory. I don't remember if he also won it in Super Bowl two. I think he did. I think he did repeat. Anyway, so I just said 1963 Jim Clark. So now I'm gonna go to 1964. The only person to win a championship on two and four wheels, meaning he was a motorbikes champion and also a car racing champion, John Surtees. I'm pretty sure he was, yeah. Um then all right, well 1965 was Jim Clark again, 1966 was Jack Brabham again. So we got a 1967 champion Denny Holm. Okay. And 1968 was Graham Hill's second final title. So 1969 we get to Sir Jackie Stewart and his first title. Yep. Which then brings me, unfortunately, to 1970 and Formula One's first and God, I hope, only ever posthumous world champion, meaning that he never got to hoist his world champion trophy because Jochen Rindt was unfortunately killed during practice for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, thanks to a crash that was partially caused by rear instability in the car because they had taken off the rear wing of the car to allow for an increased top speed around such a high speed track. But he was killed during a crash, and then he was obviously leading the championship at the time. But at the time he was killed, it was still mathematically possible for him to be caught by somebody, but no one was able to catch him. And so he was crowned champion about a month after he unfortunately passed away. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Then we skip a year because 1971 was Jackie Stewart again, and we get to 1972 with Emerson Fittipaldi. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Then I'll quickly jump over 73, which was Stewart again, 74, Fittipaldi again, to 1975, and Nicky Lauda's first championship. I think he won it both times, actually. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he had some of the best throw. He had at least one of the best throws in NFL history. I forget the one up the left sideline to Mario Manningham. Easily, that was a way better throw. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a pretty pedestrian throw, but well, in comparison, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite throws of all time. Mm-hmm. All right, then I will go to 1976 world champion James Hunt, who triumphed in his only world championship after a battle with Nicky Lauda, who probably would have won the championship that year had he not suffered a near fatal crash at the Nürburgring before it was in actually the last year before it was taken off the calendar, at least like the full circuit. I think they may have brought it back for like a in like a smaller circuit that they added and they raced around there later on, but like yeah, he Nicky Lauda suffered a fiery near fatal crash in 1976 that put him out of commission for like he was out of commission for like 40 days. He shouldn't have come. All standard logic dictates that he should not have come back at least that season, if not ever. And raced again due to the severity of his crash and his injuries. But he came back and he lost the championship to James Hunt by 1 point, even though he missed 40 days, which I think was like two races. Obviously, when he came back, he wasn't like at his top form, obviously, having suffered the kind of, trauma that he had. Hmm. Hmm. Oh, yeah. And then I will throw out 1978 champion and the second and so far most recent American champion. Although I don't think he was born in America, he had like some Italian heritage or something. Um, but Mario Andretti, you may also have heard of him through his time racing in IndyCar. Hmm. I think it might be all three of his rings. Hmm. Okay. And then 1979 champion Jody Scheckter. Sorry, I don't have much to say about him. By the way, I think I forgot to say it, but 1977 was also Niki Lauda. I just jumped straight to Andretti in 78. Hmm. Hmm. I think he has at least two, which means that I get to go just to the very next year when Alan Jones won the F1 World Championship in 1980. Mm-hmm. I yeah. Hmm. 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 Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I believe he does. Which means I'm on 1981 and Nelson Piquet's first championship. Who is the well I guess Max and his woman maybe aren't exactly married, so father-in-law may not be the exact right term, but Nelson Piquet is the father of Max Verstappen's well I get girlfriend. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They did. Oh yeah, top 10 in his final game in '99. Mm-hmm. It was '98. Sorry. I think he played better in his second Super Bowl win. Mm-hmm. Sure, they did. He won it in his final ever game. Which means I just said 1981 Nelson Piquet, so I get to say 1982 KK Rosberg, who won the championship despite no driver across the entirety of the 1982 season winning more than two races. It was the ultimate, like, everybody was like up at one point. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the ultimate like not a whole lot, not here for a good time, not a long time. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, sure. Hmm. 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 Wow. Hmm. Wow. Um. Well, yeah, while you're calming the dogs, I will say, so I just said 1982. So 1983 was also won by Nelson Piquet. 1984 was actually Niki Lauda's final championship. And so we get to 1985 and the first championship of one Alain Prost, who retired with, at the time, the most Formula One race victories of all time at the time of his retirement. I mentioned Prost on the show before. Hmm. No, he. Do you not know who he re-signed with? He did. Yep. K9. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So 1985 was Prost. So was 86. 87 it went back to PK, and then we get to 1988 with the debut championship of one Ayrton Senna. Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I believe he was. Mm-hmm. I think he's a little annoying. Sometimes he like speaks too much like he's a philosopher and everything's just so deep. But like and I also don't like the whole tush push and I I don't really like his style of play, but I mean, dude's Super Bowl MVP. I can't deny that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm sure if I sat down and ate lunch with him, he'd be a perfectly good guy. So like I'm not gonna sit here and bash him. Yeah, that's fair. Then he went to Oklahoma. Yeah. Anyway, so So yeah, 88 was Senna, 89 it went back to Prost, then Senna went back to back in 90 and 91. So then we get to 1992 and the only championship that Nigel Mansell ever won. Another driver who went over and did some stuff in IndyCar in the US. Mhm. Yep. Do they have one called the Philly Special? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. So we got the Mansell, then 93 was Alan Prost's final championship, and so we get to 1994 with the first of many championships for one Michael Schumacher. The only great. Oh boy. All right. Are we shutting it down? All right, then, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for tuning in inside the helmet. Be sure to come back next week where we finish this segment. Be sure to follow us on social media, like the video on YouTube, and subscribe and all that. And leave a comment telling us what you want to see us talk about. And yeah, thank you and good night. Yep.